Ethan's workshop smelled of oil and metal shavings. The small repair bay was quiet, except for the hum of a welding torch in his hand. Outside, the alien night storm rattled the metal walls of the station, wind howling through cracks like a ghost's whisper. He was fixing a stubborn engine part when he heard its soft footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate, not the hurried sound of a customer. He turned slightly, expecting one of the crew, but instead, a tall figure stood there, her skin a smooth shade of pale silver, her eyes glowing faintly under the dim workshop lights. She didn't say a word. She just stepped closer, her movements confident yet strange, as if she already knew what she was about to do. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Confused? "Can I help you?" he asked, without answering. She moved right up to him, her height putting her almost at his eye level. Then she glanced at the metal toolbox beside him. In one smooth motion, she stepped onto it, the soft thud of her boots echoing in the quiet. Before Ethan could ask what she was doing, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, just a few seconds, but enough to leave him frozen in place. He pulled back slightly, eyes wide. "What?" he began, but she cut him off with a small smile. "Now you belong to me," she said softly, her voice carrying a strange mix of authority and warmth. And with that, she stepped down, turned, and began walking toward the door. Ethan stood there, his mind blank, his hands still gripping the half-repaired part. He'd heard rumors about certain alien customs, about how some species use gestures to form bonds. But he'd never actually been part of it. "Wait," he called out. But she didn't stop. The door slid shut behind her with a mechanical hiss. For a few minutes, he just stood there, listening to the rain pounding on the roof, wondering if this was some sort of prank. Maybe she'd mistaken him for someone else. Maybe she was just trying to mess with the human mechanic. But a strange feeling settled in his stomach. The way she'd looked at him wasn't random. It was like she meant every word. Ethan shook his head and went back to work. But his hands felt heavier, his mind distracted. He couldn't stop replaying the way her eyes had locked on his before the kiss. Those glowing silver irises had been sharp, almost hunting, not shy or hesitant like someone making a mistake. When his shift ended, he stepped outside into the damp air of the station's main corridor. The storm had driven most people indoors. The neon lights of the shops flickered, casting broken reflections on the wet floor. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward his small quarters. Halfway there, he noticed someone leaning against the wall ahead, tall, silver-skinned, arms folded. It was her. She didn't move. As he approached, just watched him. "You," Ethan said, stopping a few steps away. "Mind telling me what that was about?" She tilted her head, her long white hair shifting with the motion. "I claimed you," she said simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Claimed me," Ethan repeated. "I'm not in my culture," she interrupted. "When a warrior finds someone worthy, she marks him. No one else can challenge that." Her voice was calm, but there was a steel edge beneath it. Ethan almost laughed. "I'm not part of your culture, lady," he said. But then he noticed the way other aliens passing by were looking at them. Some whispering, some narrowing their eyes. It wasn't just in her head. People here seemed to understand exactly what she meant. "Name's Sierra," she said, stepping closer. "And you're mine now." Before Ethan could respond, a group of 3 large aliens further down the corridor paused to stare. One of them muttered something in a low voice that made the others smirk. Sierra's eyes snapped toward them, and they quickly moved on. Ethan frowned, uneasy. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but no game," Sierra said, her tone final. "You'll see." And then she walked away again, disappearing into the shadows of the station's far end, leaving Ethan with more questions than answers. Back in his quarters, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her silver skin, her glowing eyes. The way she'd said those words, he wasn't sure whether to be worried, annoyed, or oddly flattered, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over. Somewhere deep in the station, Sira sat in a quiet corner. Sharpening a blade, her mind set. She'd made her choice, and no force in the galaxy was going to take him away. Not now, not ever. Ethan tried to start the next day as normally as possible. The workshop was already noisy with the sound of engines, clanging tools, and the occasional curse from a fellow mechanic. He focused on repairing a damaged stabilizer, trying to push away last night's strange encounter. But ignoring Sarah turned out to be impossible, because when he looked up, she was already there, standing in the doorway of his repair bay. Her arms crossed and her expression calm, as if she had been there for hours waiting for him. "You're late," she said, her voice steady. Ethan blinked. "Late for what?" "For me," she replied simply, walking inside without waiting for an invitation. She moved like she owned the place, her silver skin catching the pale light, her boots making soft thuds on the metal floor. He sighed. "Look about yesterday." "Whatever that was, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," she said, picking up a wrench from his workbench, examining it like it was some kind of weapon. "You're mine and I protect what's mine, Ethan." Rubbed his forehead. "I don't need protecting." Sira looked at him for a long moment, then placed the wrench down carefully. "Yes, you do," she said, and there was no humor in her voice from the corner of his eye. Ethan noticed two other mechanics watching them and whispering when he caught their eyes. They looked away quickly. But the message was clear. Everyone had heard, and everyone believed she had claimed him. She reached into a pouch on her belt and pulled out something wrapped in soft cloth. "A gift," she said, handing it to him. Ethan opened it to find a strange-looking fruit, bright orange with a glowing core. He had seen it before in the alien market, rare, expensive, and sweet. "I can't accept this," he said, holding it back to her. "You will," she replied without hesitation. "It shows you are chosen." Ethan sighed again, realizing this conversation was going nowhere. He set the fruit down on the workbench and returned to his repairs, hoping she would get bored and leave. But Sira didn't leave. She simply sat on an overturned crate, silently watching him work. By midday, Ethan decided he needed a break. "I'm going to the market," he told her. "I'll come," she said instantly, hopping down from the crate. They walked side by side through the station's main corridor, the air filled with the smell of spices, oil, and alien perfumes. Sira stayed close, her gaze sharp, scanning the crowd like a guard at a weapons stall. A group of 3 alien males noticed them. They were tall, broad, and covered in dark scales. One of them grinned in a way that wasn't friendly. "Human," the Tullus said, stepping forward. "She doesn't belong to you." "She's not," Ethan began. "Up." Sira stepped between them in one smooth motion, her stance tense. "She belongs to no one but me," she said coldly, her voice like ice. The scaled alien sneered. "You're breaking the rules, warrior girl. Give him up before the next moon or we'll take him from you." Ethan's stomach tightened. "I think we should just walk away," he said quietly. But Sira didn't move. Her eyes locked on the tall alien for a long moment. The air was thick with tension. Then the rival male laughed. Stepping back, "Enjoy your pet while you can," he said, before walking off with his companions. Ethan exhaled slowly. What was that about? "They want to challenge me," she said simply. "If they succeed, you'll be theirs." Ethan stared at her. "I'm not a prize to be passed around in their eyes." "You are," she replied. "And in mine, you are something worth keeping." That night, Ethan tried again to sleep, but the image of those scaled aliens lingered in his mind, their threat echoing in his ears. He didn't understand how a simple kiss had dragged him into alien politics. But one thing was clear: whatever Sarah had started, was already dangerous. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the station, Sfera sat sharpening her blade again, her thoughts fixed on the coming days. She knew the challenge would come sooner than Ethan expected, and when it did, she would not let him go. The next morning, Ethan was back in his workshop, determined to keep his head down and avoid any more trouble. He told himself that if he just ignored Sierra, maybe she would eventually lose interest. But as soon as he began tightening bolts on a fuel pump, he heard the familiar sound of her boots. "You didn't eat the gift," she said, stepping inside without asking, her eyes flicking to the untouched, glowing fruit still sitting on his workbench from yesterday. Ethan sighed. "It's not that I don't appreciate it. I just don't want to lead you on." "You already belong to me," she replied firmly. There was no leading before Ethan could respond. A loud crash echoed from outside. Shouts followed, and when he stepped out to see what was happening, he froze. Sierra was in the middle of the market, her blade drawn, standing over one of the scaled aliens from yesterday. The male was on the ground, nursing a bleeding arm. Two more stood nearby, growling in their strange guttural language. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan shouted, rushing toward her. "They came to test me," she said, without looking at him, her voice cold and steady. I answered. Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her away before station security arrived. "You can't just attack people." "In the market," he hissed. "They would have hurt you," she said simply. As if that explained everything. Back in the workshop, Ethan shut the door and turned to face her. "You can't protect me by starting fights. Do you understand how much trouble this could cause?" "I understand that trouble is already coming," she said, "and you are not ready for it." Ethan shook his head. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said, her gaze unshaken. "Enough to know I won't let them touch you." That night, Ethan decided to lock the workshop, just in case. He was halfway through repairing an old engine when he heard the faint click of the lock opening. He turned and found Sierra slipping inside. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Guard duty," she replied, sitting down in the corner, resting her blade across her knees. "I don't need a guard," he said. "You think you don't," she said quietly, "but you do." Ethan sighed and kept working, ignoring her presence. But the silence between them was heavy after a while. He noticed her eyes weren't just scanning the shadows. They were watching him, carefully, like she was studying every move he made. Hours later, as Ethan began to close up, his COM device buzzed. He picked it up, frowning at the message that flashed on the screen. "Give her up, human, or you won't live to see another sunrise." His stomach tightened. He glanced at Sierra, wondering if he should tell her, but decided against it. The last thing he needed was her charging into another fight. But Sierra noticed the change in his expression. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said quickly, slipping the device into his pocket. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Instead, she stood, her eyes scanning the shadows outside. "If they come, I'll be ready," she said. Ethan lay in bed that night, unable to sleep. The message burned in his mind. He didn't know who sent it, but he had a feeling they weren't bluffing. Somewhere across the station, in a dimly lit room, the scaled aliens sat around a table, speaking in low voices, their leader tapping his claws against the metal surface. "We'll take him soon," he said. "And when we do, she'll regret ever claiming a human back in his quarters." Ethan realized something. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Sierra too, and the dangerous world she had pulled him into, and whether he liked it or not, he was already in the middle of it. The storm outside the station had grown worse. Heavy winds screamed against the metal walls, making the entire structure groan like an old ship at sea. Inside the repair bay, the lights flickered, plunging the room into brief moments of darkness. Ethan stood over an open generator, sweat running down his face as he tried to keep the power from dying completely. Sierra was there too, standing near the doorway, her blade in hand, scanning the shadows every time the lights blinked out. She had barely spoken all day, her usual calm replaced by sharp, quiet focus. "You don't have to stand there," Ethan said while tightening a bolt. "Yes, I do," she replied without looking at him. "The storm hides more than wind." Ethan glanced at her. "You're saying someone might use this to get to me?" Her eyes flicked to him for a moment. "I'm saying someone will." Another flash of darkness swept through the room, this time lasting a little longer. When the lights came back, Ethan noticed something he hadn't before: faint scars along the side of her face and neck, barely visible unless the light hit at the right angle. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to where he was working and held the flashlight steady for him, her voice finally breaking the silence. "Raiders," she said. "They came to my world when I was young. They killed my parents, my brothers, my sisters. Everyone." Ethan paused, the wrench in his hand suddenly feeling heavier. "I'm sorry," he said. "They took me as a trophy," she continued, her voice calm but edged with something deep. "But I escaped. I learned to fight. I learned never to be weak again." She shifted her gaze to him, her silver eyes unblinking. "When I kissed you, it wasn't just a claim. It was a promise. I won't lose anyone else." For a moment, the workshop felt smaller, the storm outside distant. Ethan didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to tell her she didn't need to protect him, but another part, the part that remembered the threat message and the look in those scaled aliens' eyes, wasn't so sure before he could respond. A loud metallic bang echoed from somewhere outside. Both of them froze. Sierra moved toward the door in a blur, peering into the dark hallway. "Stay here," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan stepped forward. "Wait, if it's them, I'll handle it," she said firmly, then slipped into the shadows, her footsteps silent. Ethan kept working, up. At every few seconds, he glanced toward the doorway, the storm's roar making it hard to tell if the noises he heard were just wind or something else. Minutes later, Sierra returned, her blade wet with rain. "No one this time," she said, "but they're close. I can smell them." "That's comforting," Ethan muttered, though he meant the opposite. The night dragged on, the storm battering the station while the generator hummed under Ethan's hands. Sierra stayed close, sometimes checking the hallway, sometimes simply watching him work. He tried to focus on the repairs, but her earlier words kept repeating in his head. "I won't lose anyone else." Finally, the generator gave a steady hum. The lights brightened and the storm began to fade, but just as Ethan started to relax, they both heard it, faint footsteps. Outside, slow, deliberate, Sierra's grip tightened on her blade. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan's chest tightened. "Then let's make sure they regret coming," he said, surprising himself with the determination in his own voice. Sierra glanced at him, a small flicker of approval in her eyes. "Good," she said. "Now you're thinking like someone worth claiming." The station was quieter than usual, too quiet. Ethan stood in his workshop after hours, the doors locked, the faint hum of the generator the only sound. Sierra paced slowly near the entrance, her blade resting against her shoulder every few steps. She would pause and listen, her sharp ears twitching at even the faintest noise. "Are you sure they'll come tonight?" Ethan asked, wiping grease from his hands. "They're running out of time before the next moon," Sierra replied. "They'll want to challenge me soon." "Ah, and they'll do it when they think we're most vulnerable." A distant metallic clang echoed through the corridor. Ethan froze. Sierra's head snapped toward the sound. "They're here," she whispered, her voice like steel. Ethan moved toward the side of the room, grabbing a heavy wrench. He didn't know much about fighting aliens, but he wasn't planning to stand there empty-handed. Sarah gave him a quick look. "Stay behind me," she said. then reached over to hit the manual lock on the door. The workshop fell silent, except for their breathing. The first hit came fast. The door shuddered as something slammed into it from outside. A deep growl followed. Another hit bent the metal inward. "They're trying to break it," Ethan said under his breath. "They will." Sierra replied, "Be ready." With a final crash, the door burst open. 3 scaled aliens stormed inside, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The leader carried a jagged blade, his expression a mix of rage and arrogance. "Step aside, warrior girl," he growled in his native tongue. "The human is ours. You'll die before you touch him," Sierra shot back, her stance low, her blade flashing in the light. The fight exploded in seconds. The first alien lunged at her, but she sidestepped and slashed his arm, sending him stumbling back with a roar. The second came in from the side, but Ethan swung his wrench with all his strength, hitting him across the shoulder. The alien staggered but didn't fall. The leader charged straight for Ethan, blade raised before it could strike. Sierra moved like lightning, intercepting the blow with a clash of steel, sparks flying in the air. "Run," she shouted. At Ethan, "Not happening." He yelled back, ducking under a swing and slamming the wrench into the alien's knee. The creature hissed in pain, stumbling backward. The fight became a blur of movement, Sierra moving with lethal precision, her strikes fast and brutal. Ethan using tools as improvised weapons, the attackers relentless, each one trying to get past her guard. Then it happened. One of the aliens managed to grab Ethan from behind, an arm locking around his neck, cold steel pressed to his throat. "Drop your blade or I'll open him," the alien hissed. Sierra froze, her chest rising and falling, her eyes burning like fire. "Let him go," she said, her voice low and dangerous. The leader smirked. "You want him? Prove he's worth keeping." For a moment, no one moved. The storm of the earlier night seemed to hang in the air again. Then Sierra's lips curled into a thin, deadly smile. "You just made your last mistake." In one swift motion, she flicked her wrist, sending a small hidden blade flying from her gauntlet. It buried itself in the alien's shoulder. He screamed, loosening his grip on Ethan, who ducked away instantly. Sierra closed the distance in a heartbeat, her main blade slicing the air and forcing the leader to stumble back. The remaining 2 attackers, seeing their advantage gone, began retreating toward the door, but not before the leader pointed at Ethan. "This isn't over, human," he snarled. "You can't hide behind her forever." When they were gone, Ethan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. I thought that was it," he said between breaths. Sierra sheathed her blade, stepping closer to him. "As long as I live, no one will take you," she said firmly, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. Ethan swallowed, unsure if he should feel grateful, terrified, or both. But one thing was certain. He couldn't keep pretending this was just some misunderstanding. Whatever Sierra had started, it was now a fight for survival. The attack had left the workshop a mess. Tools scattered across the floor, the door bent and hanging loose. Ethan was still breathing hard when the sound of boots echoed from the hallway. Station security arrived, their black uniforms and bright visors reflecting the light. The officer in front scanned the room, his gaze falling on the deep claw marks on the wall and the drops of alien blood. "What happened here?" he asked. Sharply, "An unprovoked attack," Sierra said before Ethan could speak. "They came for him." The officer's visor tilted slightly toward Ethan. "Is this true?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, but she's the problem," another officer interrupted. Stepping forward, "We've had multiple reports of this warrior interfering in market disputes, challenging other residents, making threats." Sierra's jaw tightened. They threatened him first. The first officer raised a hand to silence her. then looked at Ethan. "You're a registered human mechanic under station law, correct?" "Yeah," Ethan replied, unsure where this was going. "Then you should know," the officer continued. "Human residents are not permitted to be claimed by alien citizens without official approval. It causes political disputes between species." Ethan frowned, claimed, "I didn't exactly sign up for this, which is why we're offering you a solution." The officer said, "We can dissolve this. Bond and send her back to her people. She'll be their responsibility, not yours." Ethan glanced at Sierra. She was standing still, but her eyes were locked on him, sharp and unblinking. "Is that what you want?" the officer asked. The silence in the workshop felt heavy. Ethan thought about the last few days, the kiss, the strange gifts, the threats, the fights. The way she had thrown herself between him and a blade without hesitation. She was trouble. No doubt, but she had also risked her life more than once to keep him safe. "If I agree," Ethan said slowly, "what happens to her?" "She's sent back to her homeworld." The officer replied, "They'll deal with her. Maybe strip her warrior rank, maybe worse. That's not your concern." Sierra's voice cut through the air, low and steady. "If you send me away, you won't last a week." The officers looked between them. Waiting, Ethan took a deep breath, his decision forming like steel in his mind. "I'm not sending her anywhere," he said firmly. "She's with me." The officer frowned. "You understand this means you're taking responsibility for her. Actions, any trouble she causes is on you." "I understand," Ethan said, without hesitation. For the first time since they met, Sierra's expression softened. Just slightly, her shoulders relaxing. The officers exchanged glances, but finally turned away. "Very well, but don't expect our help if this turns bad," the leader said before, leaving the sound of their boots fading down the corridor. When they were gone, Ethan turned to Sierra. "You could have told me they'd try to get rid of you." "I didn't think you'd choose me," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "I didn't choose you," he said with a small smirk. "I chose not to let them decide for me." Sierra tilted her head, studying him for a moment, then gave a faint, almost rare smile. That is how warriors think. But the moment didn't. Last, a shadow passed over her eyes. "They'll come again, and next time, they won't run." Ethan nodded. "Then we make sure we're ready." Later that night, word spread quickly through the station. The human mechanic had openly declared himself allied with a warrior girl from a rival clan. Some called it foolish, others whispered it was brave, but for Ethan and Sierra, it didn't matter. They had chosen their side, and they would face whatever came next together. The station felt tense, the air heavier than usual. Word of Ethan's choice had spread fast, and Sierra's rivals were not going to let it pass. Ethan could feel it in the way people stared at them as they walked through the market, in the way. Some shopkeepers quickly turned away when Sierra's silver eyes locked on them. That evening, Ethan closed up the workshop early, his instincts telling him something was coming. Sierra stayed close, her blade strapped to her back. She hadn't spoken much all day, but her hand never strayed far from her weapon. They were halfway to Ethan's quarters when the attack came, shadowy figures stepping out from behind cargo crates in the dim corridor. 5 of them this time, all scaled warriors, their leader at the front, the same one who had threatened them before, his jagged blade glinting under the corridor lights. "You had your chance to walk away human," the leader growled. "Now you'll regret standing with her." Ethan didn't move, his grip tightening on the wrench he had brought from the workshop. Sierra stepped in front of him, her stance low and deadly. "You'll regret touching what's mine," she said, her voice like ice. The first 2 attackers charged. Sierra moved like lightning, her blade flashing as she struck. One went down with a deep cut to the leg. The other barely dodged and stumbled back. The corridor erupted into chaos. Ethan swung his wrench hard at one of the scaled warriors, trying to flank Sierra. The impact made the alien roar in pain and stagger back. But another grabbed Ethan's arm from behind, twisting it hard before Ethan could cry out. Sarah was there, slashing the attacker's arm and shoving him away. "Stay behind me," she shouted. "Not happening." Ethan yelled back, swinging again, this time knocking a blade out of an alien's hand. The leader stepped forward, his eyes burning. "Enough games," he snarled, lunging at Sarah with brutal speed. Their blades clashed, the sound ringing through the corridor, sparks flying as they pushed against each other. Ethan could see this wasn't like the last fight. The leader was stronger, faster, every strike forcing Sarah back a step. Then with a sudden kick, the leader knocked her off balance. Sending her to one knee, his blade raised high for the final blow. Without thinking, Ethan charged forward. Slamming his wrench into the leader's side with all his strength, the alien roared and stumbled. Giving Sarah the opening she needed, with one swift motion, she slashed upward, knocking the leader's blade from his hand and pressing her own to his throat. The corridor went silent. The other attackers froze. Sarah's voice was low and deadly. "Leave, or I'll send your heads back to your clan." The leader's eyes flicked between her and Ethan, rage burning in them, but slowly he stepped back, motioning for the others to retreat. "This isn't over," he hissed. Before disappearing into the shadows, when the last of them was gone, Sarah lowered her blade. Her breathing heavy, Ethan stepped closer. "You okay?" he asked. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You fought beside me," she said quietly, almost like she didn't believe it herself. "I wasn't going to let them take you down," he replied. "Not after everything you've done for me." Something shifted in her expression. The hard warrior's mask softening, she stepped closer until she was only inches away. Her voice, barely above a whisper, "Told you. You're mine forever." Ethan didn't answer right away, but then he gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am." They walked back to his quarters in silence. But it wasn't the heavy silence of before. This one felt different, like a bond had truly been forged, not just by her claim, but by the battles they had fought together later that night. As the station's lights dimmed into night mode, Ethan sat in his small room. Sarah resting nearby with her blade across her lap. Outside, the storm winds began to howl again. But inside, for the first time since this all began, Ethan felt something he hadn't expected. Safety. And in the quiet, he realized something else too. Maybe she hadn't just claimed him. Maybe, in his own way, he had claimed her too.